Well, Grandmaster Oliver, we've known each other for 20 years,
At
and
least. Yeah.
yeah, we talk all the time. And thanks for joining us on this Go To Karate Magazine interview. And I have a few questions to ask you. As always, you impressed me with your martial arts background, and other than people think about and hear about you in martial arts business, but your martial arts background is really impressive. Tell us how you started in martial arts.
Well, I guess I was the prototypical 9-year-old getting beat up by the neighborhood bully. And my parents wouldn't let me buy a gun, so they enrolled me at the local YMCA. And as luck would turn out, the local Y was run by a bunch of instructors who were a branch of the Junri Institute. And so that ended up, I ended up by the time I was 14 taking over the whole program. So, if you want to think about it, I was a school owner when I was 14, although not by our standards at this point. And then I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. and working my way through Georgetown University as first a head instructor, then a program director, then a branch manager for the Junri Institute, which, they were world renowned because they had a stable of fighters that was unexcelled. They had the top two world champion forms competitors, John Chung and Charlie Lee, but they had about half of the PKA rated kickboxing champions back then. The U.S. champion middleweight, welterweight, the U.S. world champion, that'd be Jeff Smith, who's on our team. But they had some of the top fighters in the world, some of the top forms competitor in the world, and that's how I ended up working my way through college.
Well, and you fought with those guys. I mean, people need to understand that you grew up in a tough fighting environment, a tough martial arts environment.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, I mean, you've told me stories about this before, and this is not an environment when people think of the Junri Institute, I think they think of, especially because it was super successful and super great business operations back in the day and for that time. But these were amazing fighters and fought all over the world and were really tough guys.
Yeah, well, it was the blood and guts era in Tulsa and Oklahoma and in Texas. So, as a teenager, I was fighting in Dallas and Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and so forth. And when we say blood and guts era, it really was. You didn't end up out of a tournament without quite a few bruises and nicks. But then in Washington D.C., it was thrown in right into it was like being thrown into a pit bull, cage, because you had all these world champion kickboxers, and all of them were sadists. I must say, I was working with Rodney Batiste, who was the world middleweight, or he was the U.S. middleweight champion. He only lost to Don Wilson and to John Yves Terrio. But I was, terrified of Rodney. And then I'd watch Rodney spar with Jeff, and then he made him look like an amateur many times. So, that was the area, and it was really, Jeff's management style was, if you didn't hit your numbers this week, you're going to show up early and spar me. And so that was the environment I grew up in.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about that before, and I think that it's important for people to understand that the people that came from that era that and now are teaching and now running really very successful schools and super high income schools, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit later. That comes from a solid martial arts background, and not only that, but I know I've heard you talk about that. It's not just that it comes from a solid martial arts background, but to have a really successful school and be and make a lot of income, you require having solid martial arts too.
Yeah, well, I think it's a prerequisite for long-term success. It's certainly not a prerequisite for short-term, making a big splash on marketing. But, I mean, I'm celebrating 41 years with Mile High Karate this year. But to have that kind of longevity and to create tremendously good staff, instructors, and so forth, you really have to have a solid base. What you and I were talking about before we started recording, though, is I kind of grew up in the Rich Dad Poor Dad. That great book by guy. No, I forget his name, but
Robert Kiyosaki.
Robert Kiyosaki. I was getting ready to say Guy Kawasaki. That's the Mac guy. But my instructors in Oklahoma had no idea that you could make a living running martial arts schools. And then when I moved to the Junri Institute, it was a multi-million-dollar, probably the most financially successful organization in the world at the time. And it was such a shock because I thought I was going to work my way through Georgetown to get a degree, go on to Harvard, MBA, and work my way, on Wall Street, and figured out I could make as much money as I would on Wall Street running martial arts schools and do something I loved and do something that would really have an impact. And that's when I moved to Denver. We've talked before about it, but I moved to Denver 22 years old and was kind of silver spoon in my mouth in this case because I grew up in the Junior Institute and had all of the business processes in place. But I, ended up with 6 schools in 30 months. What was it? 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months. Within 30 months, by the time I was 25 years old, I had 3,500 active students. So it was, quite the splash in the industry back then. It was, everybody from Century all on was covering it in whatever newsletters and stuff existed back then. But built that organization and was smart enough to realize that the Junior Institute had taught me how to be a really quality teacher. I had the quality martial arts background, but I really didn't understand the marketing systems. I knew the sales systems, but I didn't. They were feeding us lots of traffic through the switchboard. So I spent a bunch of time learning how to do marketing. I mean, living in the Library of Congress and, taking courses and so forth, and really had to get that part of it down. And then, once you have a big staff, I mean, at one time I had 50, mostly instructors and program directors working for me. You figure out you really don't know management very well and leadership and all of that. And after, working through a few disasters with staff, really had to master that as well.
So you had a really great background from the Junior Institute in terms of sales, but also really great background in terms of instruction, but you had to master marketing and management once you got to Colorado.
Yeah, well, I knew the introductory enrollment sales process. I had the renewal process, renewal prep in place. I had mastered the keys of, sort of putting together scheduling and structuring classes and later on, not too much later, I figured out I needed better curriculum design. So I had a PhD in education who worked with me in that, and then worked on personality profile and all the different things you do when you're looking at developing a better way to train instructors, right? Because I had been trained as an instructor, I hadn't trained instructors, so I figured out that was a gap pretty quickly. And on the business side, you start learning of, you have to deal with taxes, you have to deal with accounting, and you have to deal with the IRS and the state authorities, and all of that is a learning curve pretty early on as well. At least when you grow to the size I did, as quickly as I did.
I think that a lot of martial arts instructors, they learn from their instructor, they learn to be a black belt in martial arts, sometimes don't even learn how to be a really good instructor. It's assumed that because they're a black belt, they must know how to teach. Then they open a school, and that's the end of their education.
Yeah, yeah, and it is. First of all, they should have been a lot better educated before they opened the school. That's why our industry has the highest failure rate probably of any, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's unusual for a martial arts school to make it past the first year. And it's also unusual for them to grow beyond the Walking Dead standpoint, right? They have 40 students, they have 80 students, they're working a day job to support themselves, or they've taken a vow of poverty, which was kind of the way my original instructors in Tulsa were. They assumed you couldn't make a living. But you have to go from an athlete to a master teacher, and then you have to go to a salesperson. I mean, whatever word you want to use, people don't like that, but you've got to be able to bring a new person in and get them enrolled in the program, and then show them that they want to make this a lifestyle and do the renewals and so forth. But then if you don't know how to fill the place up, you've got to learn. Back then I was learning TV marketing, TV advertising, short form, long form, newspaper, direct mail, all of that, and now it's also Google and Facebook and all the other online sources. If you don't know that, you don't know how to create traffic. And then if you don't grow to the next level and learn how to train instructors and train program directors, you can never go beyond you doing the work yourself. I think the main thing in our industry is we're in like I said, the rich dad, poor dad thing. Most people's expectations never grow beyond what their instructors' expectations were. If I came up in a school that was doing $1 million a year, I go, oh, I can do that. And if I came up in a rec center or in a school that never grew beyond 40 students, they go, that just must be what it is, and maybe I can, exercise my hobby and teach a few people.
Yeah, I think that's a rampant problem in the industry is their expectations are very, very low.
Yeah, yeah, they well, again, the build it you will come thing doesn't work, right? So if I'm a high quality athlete and I've got my resume out there, nobody cares, right? You're not going to build a good organization if you're not capable, but it doesn't bring anybody to you. And then you've got to become a true master teacher to be able to carry students through Black Belt and beyond and keep them from dropping out. But then you've got to figure out how do I get my message out in the community? The first thing you and I know with our martial arts wealth, training program is we start with getting them to do the pricing right, then to get the sales process right, and then open the floodgate. But even if I got good at marketing, if I'm not good at facilitating, turning them into enrollments, but then keeping them long term, I just become a hamster on a wheel and running until I die from exhaustion.
Yeah, it's ironic that somebody might spend 5 years or 10 years and thousands of hours learning to be a black belt or a high level martial artist, and they spend almost no time really learning to be an instructor. They learn the material, but they don't learn it to be an instructor. And then they spend even less time learning to be owning their business or learning to enroll people or sell people. And also that idea that sales is like a nasty word or something, when that's really just communicating how somebody's going to get started with you. And then we get people that have a lot of problems. Guess what? Enrolling people. Guess what? Marketing to get people in, and they struggle and struggle and struggle and be stressful and stressful, and then it's hard for them to thrive and be happy in this type of work.
That book I wrote, God, what is it, 1999 now, 20 coming up on 24, 25 years. But there's a chapter in there called "Don't Confuse Your Hobby with Your Career," and I think that's what most martial artists do. Is they are so excited. I get to travel to Brazil and learn from the Brazilians, BJJ, or I get to travel to Japan and learn from the masters, or whatever it might be, depending upon what their style and their interests are. I got to finally travel to Thailand and learn. Well, in most cases, they've accomplished a level of skill set, but they haven't translated into being a master teacher, and even that doesn't get them anywhere close to having a career running a martial arts school, a martial arts educational organization. So we see that over and over and over again. If we went out into the industry and said, "Hey, we're going to teach you to maximize your art and how to really learn at the highest level," all the broke guys are going to love that idea, right?
Yeah.
But the ones who are really looking to earn a living and really learning to build a quality school, at some point they come to understand they got to be a master teacher, and that's curriculum structure, design, pacing, the evolutionary process. And then they've got to learn how to market to get people coming in the door. And then they have to learn leadership skills and sales skills to convert that. And then if they're going to ever grow beyond it being their personal talent, they've got to learn how to recruit and train staff and how to operate with systems rather than just their personality.
Yeah, those are important components that I think is if they think they spend 10,000 hours learning to be a martial arts enthusiast or
Yeah.
skill
Athlete.
athlete and,
Yeah.
and have capability, aren't they going to spend at least that much time? And you outlined 3 or 4 components, at least that much time on the total, if not that much time on each one of those components that they could be working on, and that just seems to never happen. And we end
Well,
up
to be a little controversial, is your own personal talent is way less important than your ability to relay that skill set to somebody else in our profession. And then the marketing, leadership, sales component is more important, frankly, than that. Is, again, you look at any other business, is, if you don't get the word out and you don't get the buzz and you don't anchor yourself in the community and get the right number of people coming in, doesn't matter how good you are, you're just gonna die on the vine.
well, if you don't have any followers, you can't really be a leader.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like the one thing, well, one thing I was going to mention, you mentioned your book. It might be relevant, especially for our interview, to mention some of the books that you've written, so that people can get them and maybe get a copy of them.
Yeah, well, there's the ones that are still relevant and in print is the Everything I Wish I Knew When I Was 22 book, and the Way of the Mile High Maverick. Both of those are available everywhere books are available, but it's for free at martialartswealth.com. So we have a big packet of information. In fact, we have it's not quite stillborn, but it's on the shelf is the new iteration of the Full Extraordinary Marketing book. So we're in the by the time they listen to this, maybe it'll be available as well. But all of that is, for free at martialartswealth.com.
Yeah, so when they go to martialartswealth.com, they can get a copy of those books, and I've read all those books, and I would recommend that for anybody that's in the martial arts business. Whether you got a small school and you want to stay, maybe you want to stay small, but you still want to pick out some information that's going to help you with making your life better. I think that one thing that I've noticed that but if you want to grow bigger, then you ought to have that information, especially. But one thing that I've noticed that's really important that you've helped people with is have them run their business and also have kind of less brain damage. I think that's an important key that people don't realize, that also they get into a habit or have problems that end up taking a lot of extra time, a lot of extra work, and a lot of extra is I would say brain damage, and you've helped them with making their business work better, make them happier because their business is running in a much more effective way.
Yeah. I might say it this way, and it's kind of uncharitable, but our industry has been overrun by, stealing from Steve Jobs, a bozo explosion of consultants, right? And many of them in their own business and in what they're relaying may be halfway decent at building a bigger operation, but they're really bad at developing one, like you said, low brain damage that's easy to operate with systems with high net profit. Some of my friends are among those, but they've always operated with low margin, big staff, very complicated, and frankly, it's not conducive, to sanity, much less to, really being able to enjoy building your business. Our priority is have a huge impact on your community, develop the highest quality possible students, and they stay with you as long as humanly possible with a high percentage to the bottom line and an operation that's systematized, replicatable. And frankly, if you're in Hawaii for a month, everything continues to run just fine. So that, those really should be the goals, is huge impact in the community, quality students, while having a well-paid staff, having them paid better than they could, earn anywhere else that they might work. And at the same time, having a high percentage to the bottom line and a high quality lifestyle.
Yeah, I think those are key points, because when we meet a lot of martial arts instructors, sometimes they're just tired after doing this for 20 or 30 years. And it's because they're in their business, working their business all the time, because that's just what you do, right? You need to teach all the classes, you need to do all the work, and they are frustrated they can't find staff. Well, they've been paying their staff very little money. They haven't been that successful. They have not much money in the bank, and they're not doing that well, and maybe their spouse is making money instead of them. And what I think some examples, what are some examples of people in martial arts wealth mastery and kind of what they're doing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we've got we have our $1 million plus group, and that's based upon single school performance, and I mean, kind of the key performance metrics we're looking at is 50% or more to the bottom line. So, a school doing $1 million a year, we want to be making $500,000 or more personally, right? And having the average revenue per student, whether you're talking lifetime value or average monthly value, in the range of $300 or $400 a month average revenue per student, but also having the dropout rate at 1 or 2%, not at the industry norm of, I don't know, 10%, 8%, 7%. So most schools, are flushing out the entire school every year, rather than, to me, that's the hamster on the wheel thing, rather than really making forward progress.
Yeah, I think a lot of schools don't realize what their retention rate is, and when we talk to them, they end up saying, oh, all my students stay with me, and when we don't have a lot of dropouts. But then when we ask, what is your dropout rate? They don't know the answer to that. And I think that if anybody doesn't know their dropout rate that's reading the interview, then the answer is you probably have a bad one.
Out of thousands of school owners that I've talked to, or that you have, or that Bob Dunn has, there's been exactly one that I ever talked to and said, I don't know how you get better than that. And he was dropping out 0.7% a month. And the other thing we haven't addressed, I know we're going to be out of time here, but the whole McDojo black belt factory type of thing. When I was in Washington D.C., they called us a belt factory, and the new term is McDojo. When I moved to Denver, all of the local guys, thought I was a quote unquote belt factory. You know what it was? We had way more black belts than everybody else, but they were way better than everybody else's black belts at the same time. And it was, one, we had good retention, and two, we just had more students, right? When I was 25 years old, I had at least a 60% market share of the Denver metro market in my schools. And I mean, it doesn't imbue you. You don't end up on the Christmas list for your competitors. But the other thing was my door was always open. People like Harry Bryan and so forth. Anybody who asked questions, I was free. I shared. Hell, most of the advertising I was doing helped them too. I'd have them ask, when are you going to be back on TV? That's helping us too. But there's just this excuse that martial artists have that they don't want to water down their curriculum or one thing or another. Well, that's BS. What you want to do is keep improving the quality of your curriculum, improving the quality of your students, and getting critical mass of enough of them that you have leadership roles and you have enough people in your school so that you don't have to be doing all the work.
Yeah, and I've been to your black belt boot camp, and you and I have talked about mine.
Yeah.
Mine is harder. Yours is harder. Yours is a 3-day intensive that the students have to go through and do all kinds of stuff like a death run and all kinds of different things that they have to do. That
Well, we keep them up for for 72 hours straight.
Yeah, and that's important for people to know that as things get more difficult, that doesn't have to hurt retention. So these criticisms that sometimes people have of, oh well, if you're going to make money or you're going to be successful, you're going to have a lot of students. It must be because of poor curriculum or poor quality. And I think the answer is it may be exactly the opposite.
No, most people, the way their curriculum and the way they're teaching it hasn't had anybody who understood curriculum design look at it, right? It got handed down, the last 100 years, and that's just the way they did it. I would hope we're smarter than that now. But as far as the difficulty, I think people confuse what a student can accomplish in the first year versus what the standard should be to be a black belt versus what the standard should be to be a second or third degree black belt. And the mission of the first year is get them into the second year. The mission of the second year is to really get the foundation down and get them into the third year. And the purpose of the black belt is for you to be proud of them. If you put them on video in front of anybody in the world, you'd say, oh, wow, they're really accomplished. Even back in the 80s, I had kids who were purple belts and blue belts that local schools would try to give them black belts because they thought they were, they deserved their black belt. It's like, no, they're not there yet. We're still working on it. But that's what you want. You want at the high levels, third year, fourth year, for them to be, better. I would send blue belts, they would move and go across the country and get promoted to black belt in 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes 2 or 3 months. I had red belts that I'd send to Arkansas or California, and they would put them as instructors pretty quickly. So it's not about watering down the curriculum. It's being realistic about what you do with white belts. When I was a white belt, first day we were sparring bare knuckle, no mouthpiece. We all wore groin cuffs because you were kicking each other there all the time. But that's stupid, right? As soon as somebody breaks their nose, gets a black eye, chips a tooth, they're not coming back. All of our guys are as hardcore as anybody, but they're hardcore when they're brown belts, not when they're white belts.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think what you said a minute ago that was buried in there is that the curriculum has been the curriculum from 100 years ago, not really 100 years, but maybe 40 or 50 years ago when somebody invented
From
it
the
or made it up.
50s or the 40s or the 30s.
Yeah, and then we assumed, and a lot of times that was when it was mostly adults training. And so they didn't necessarily have, or and frankly, mostly adults, and maybe badass adults that were in their 20s or 25 years old, and they were fighting. And that may not have been the right design of curriculum, and it may not have been the right place for it when you could have built it up or had a different strategy. Or maybe they only had 10 students then, and that was the design of their curriculum, and they didn't serve as many people on a bell curve. So I think that's buried into the message that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, with me, I mean, I started when I was 9. By the time I ended up taking over the school, I was the only one left that had started with me, right? I was just crazy enough, and I say that, people who trained from the 60s or the 70s is probably we have a screw loose to have gone through, what they were, having us do. I did knife defense demonstrations when I was 13 with a live Bowie knife, with a Vietnam vet who had been a tunnel rat. I look back and go, it's amazing I'm alive, much less have fond memories of that stuff.
Or all your fingers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's not where the knife was going. It was it was going between my legs to put it nicely. I'm glad I'm not a eunuch at this point.
Well, we got to wrap up here today, sir, and it's been great talking to you. This is something that somebody you know it, hopefully understanding when they work with martial arts wealth mastery that it's about all the different pieces of your business to make your business successful. It's not just having, talking about your finances or talking about your sales or talking about your marketing, but also making sure that you have a balanced business that everything is working together in.
Well, I would say it's number one, having a business coach who's been there, done that, and done that successfully, repetitiously. And it's having a mastermind group of some of the best martial artists in the world who are also making a fabulous living. And I don't know whether they learn more from me, you, Jeff Smith, Bob Dunn, or whether they learn more from the peer group that we plug them into. But it's a combination of those factors, and it's the constant and never-ending reminder. I used to do those EFC board meetings, and for many years I was the number one school out of the group, but I always came away pissed off about something. I could catch up with my retention because Buzz Durkin was kicking my ass. I could have a more exciting classroom because Ernie Reyes was kicking my ass. There was something that I would always find that was going to piss me off enough to move me to a new level. And if we don't have that in our life on a regular basis, we miss that driving force and many of us are competitive, that driving force to accomplish at the highest level.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap up. And I hope that everybody's hearing that having a peer group plus having mentors is going to be a key point for their success moving forward.
Yeah, plus all the resources.
Well, right. And I think sometimes people get confused. They say, well, I just have a book or I just have resources. The other thing I think people get mixed up in is they think that they have to go out and learn from one person, another person, another person, another person, another person, and then cobble together their business plan. And that's always a recipe for failure.
They create a mess.
Yeah, they exactly because they don't know how all these things fit, and that's what you're helping them with, and martial arts world mastery is helping them with. So that ties everything together in a really cohesive way.
Most people that we work with, we have to unmess up the stack of things and then fix it.
Yeah, that's right, sir. Okay, well, Grandmaster Oliver, thank you very much. I have the greatest respect for you and your team that's helping other people and mentoring school owners in the industry. And you've been doing this for so long and had so much success that
I started when I was minus 10, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we've known each other 20 years, so it's a long time for me too, sir. And thanks again for being here, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us here at GoToKarate Magazine, and I hope everybody has a great day.
The recording has
All right,
stopped.
there we went.